Welcome to the video on Chapter 2 segments covering Lesson 5, more about midpoints. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to answer the question, how to find the midpoint of a segment on a coordinate plane. Before we actually get started with lesson number 5, I'd like to take a quick look at lesson number 4, which we are skipping because I know for a fact it's very heavy review on the coordinate plane. So the notes, I just have a picture here. I'm going to be putting all those words that are in that word bank there, labeling the coordinate plane. So I just need you to be cognizant. I'd like you to pause the video on the next screen, take a look at everything, how it's all labeled, and just keep it in the back of your mind as we go through the actual lesson today. Let's take a look at some vocabulary dealing with midpoints. We have discussed midpoint earlier in this chapter, and specifically what it does is it is a point that bisects a segment. And bisect means to divide into two equal parts. We talked about this when we were discussing congruent segments, that the midpoint creates two congruent segments because they are equal. It cuts it in half. We're going to be looking at the midpoint formulas from two different types of problems, from a number line and then from a coordinate plane. Their formulas are very similar, but we're just going to do one thing at a time. Let's go ahead and start with the number line. So what we're going to do with the number line is we will take the two numbers that we're trying to find the midpoint of, take those two numbers and divide by 2. So in this example, we're finding the midpoint of Q and U using this formula. So Q is located at -5 and U is located at 4. We will plug those into our formula. Using this, we get -1/2 or -0.5, it doesn't matter. The big thing here is that when you are using this sort of formula in your calculator, if you're doing it all in one step, you have to have the numerator sum inside parentheses before you divide by 2 in your calculator if you're doing it all at once. If you're going to hit enter after you do -5 plus 4, enter, before you divide by 2, you're good. But if you don't hit enter, you must have parentheses there. So the midpoint for QU is -1/2. Next one, the midpoint between R and T. Well, R is located at -3 and T is at 1. So using the formula, the midpoint of RT is at -1. Go ahead and try example 3 on your own. You are finding the midpoint of SV. So S is here and V is here. Hopefully you got the answer of +2. So +2 is the location directly in the middle between 5 and -1. It's cutting the SV perfectly in half. Now let's apply this to the coordinate plane. The formulas for the coordinate plane are exactly like the number line, but instead we must use our x coordinates together. So we will add the x coordinates and divide by 2. Then we will add the y coordinates and divide by 2. You have seen these little sub 1s and sub 2s before in algebra, which simply just means the first x plus the second x, the first y plus the second y. These little 1s and 2s are simply labeling which x and which y to use in the formula. So let's take a look at an example. The original problem says M is the midpoint of JK, and they give us the coordinates of J and K. We are supposed to find the coordinates of M. So I went ahead and I used my coordinate plane and I plotted the points -2, -2 for J, and the points -10, +2 for K. And we're supposed to find exactly where in here the midpoint M is located. We will be using this formula. In order to use the formula, we must first recognize what our x values are and what our y values are. So I've labeled them in green up top. And I've labeled them with the little 1s and 2s, again, just to signify that this is the first point, x, y. This is the second point, x, y. It's not x, x and y, y. That's not how the coordinate plane works. So once I plug in these values, the two x values, I add them together and I'll divide by 2. Add the two y values and divide by 2. I will get my midpoint. So the midpoint value for M is -6, 0. So -6, 0 is this point right here. So I will label it with a little m. I I do want to draw your attention to the difference with this problem. In this problem, you are actually given the midpoint. It says, suppose that -4 and -3 is the midpoint. So we're not calculating the midpoint here. Instead, we will need to use the formula and the midpoint, or trust the coordinate plane to find the other missing endpoint. So this is a little bit different than the example that we just got done doing. So let me start by first plotting the points that are given to me. Now, if you simply want to use the coordinate plane over here, it's important to notice that K is the endpoint and L is the midpoint. And I know it's weird, but we're still finding the coordinates for M, but that's actually the other endpoint. And if L is in fact the midpoint, then that means it's the middle between K and then M should be somewhere over here if L is in the middle of it. So what we can use is actually our distance between K. So it's 2 bumps up and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we talk about our rise and run, it's up 2 and then it's to the left 6. So if I continue with that, we should be going up 2 and then to the left 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this should be our value for M, which would be -10, -1. And let's check that algebraically. In order to check it algebraically, we need to understand that these are in fact formulas and they really could be equations. So the x value of the midpoint, so this is L in this case, L is our midpoint, the x value of the midpoint is found using this formula. The y value of the midpoint L is found using this formula, but we are given our x values for L. We know them, so instead I can plug in numbers here. We also know one of the 2 points, one of the 2 x values, one of the 2 y values in K right here. So I'm going to fill in what I have using the formulas. So I plugged in my values, and what we need to look at here is how to solve. So I'm going to not have as much space to show every single thing, so I'm going to instead explain it using words here. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. That will then leave me with 2 plus x, where I can subtract 2 from both sides. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, which will then leave me with -5 plus y, where I can add 5 to both sides to find my y value. And after doing that, we see that I do in fact get the exact same points that I did when I simply counted the rise and run difference over here. -10, -1 are the coordinates of endpoint M, using the algebra, but also using the coordinate plane. Our final example together here is a little bit different. It's asking you to consider the point P, and it is the midpoint of some line CF, and that's all the information we're given. So we're just going to name one nice coordinate of possible endpoints of C and F. We're not going to name all of them. We're not given enough information about how long the segment CF is. So we're really not even going to use the formula here. I'm just going to be consistent and use the coordinate plane to count out. Now I'm just going to use 2 and 6. I'm going to go up 2, and I'm going to go to the right 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a completely random point. I don't even know why I used 2, 6. But I'm going to do it on the other side. Go down 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then to the left 6. That'll be my other endpoint. So there's point C, and there's point F. And it could be those points. It could be other points. I could start maybe up here, and I want to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 and over 1, and then as long as I go down 4 and over 1, then that would be a correct answer also. So you just need to realize that there are lots of options here, so I'm going to identify the values for these 2 points, and that will be my answer for this example. This concludes our video about midpoints on the coordinate plane. And on the number line, but more specifically and possibly new is the coordinate plane stuff. So just make sure you're careful with your X and Y's, and use your calculator if you need to help you with those addition problems, especially whenever we have those negatives and the division.